Let me begin by telling you something that may not sound very inspirational at first, but I promise it's important. Life is uncertain. Always has been, always will be. Now, I don't say that to discourage you. I say it because sometimes the truth, spoken plainly, is the most comforting thing we can hear. Because deep down we know it already. We just need to be reminded that we're not alone in it. We often think of uncertainty as something that sneaks up on us, as if it's this unwelcome visitor knocking on the door at the worst possible time. Maybe it shows up as a layoff at work, a business deal that dries up, a relationship that starts to shift. Maybe it's a call from the doctor you didn't expect, or a change in the economy that rattles your sense of security. You've probably been there. And if you haven't yet, you will. Because uncertainty doesn't play favorites. It visits all of us. And here's what's interesting. When it does, we often look around and assume that everyone else has it figured out. We think, well, surely they know what they're doing. They've got a plan. They're confident. But I'll let you in on a little secret. After a lifetime of listening to people from all walks of life, most of us are just doing the best we can, one decision at a time. That's it. Now, I want to take you back a few decades, if I may, back to when I was a boy. I was born in 1921, and when the Great Depression hit in 1929, I was just 8 years old. At that age, you don't fully understand what's happening, but you can feel it. You feel it in the look on your mother's face when she's trying to stretch a small meal to feed everyone. You feel it when your father or your neighbor comes home from another day of walking the streets, searching for work that just isn't there. You feel it in the heaviness of the silence at the dinner table. We didn't have much, not many people did. Families were losing their homes, their savings disappeared overnight when the banks collapsed. And there was no FDIC back then to protect your money. If the bank failed, your dollars went with it. People stood in long lines just to get a bowl of soup or a piece of bread. Proud men, hard-working men, suddenly out of options. Entire communities shaken to their core. And yet, I remember how people kept going. They found ways to make it through. Odd jobs, small trades, anything to bring in a little something to hold the family together. Mothers learned to make miracles out of leftovers. Neighbors shared what little they had. Sometimes 3 families would move into one house just to stay afloat. The fear was real. But so was the resilience. And that's what stayed with me. Even in the darkest days, people chose to keep going. Now, fast forward to today. Uncertainty hasn't gone anywhere. It's just changed its clothes. You might be waiting on results from a medical test, or wondering if your relationship is headed for the future or for the door. Maybe you're in between jobs, or afraid your job might be next. Or you're watching the markets bounce around like a rubber ball and thinking, what now? The specifics change, but the feeling, that uncertainty in your chest, the knot in your stomach, that hasn't changed at all. And here's where most of us fall into a trap. When things become unclear, when the future gets foggy, we tend to do one of 3 things. We freeze, we stop moving. We flee, we try to escape the discomfort, distract ourselves, change directions too quickly. Or, if we're wise, we pause. We take a breath, we ground ourselves, and then we choose to move forward, on purpose. Let me tell you something I've learned that may surprise you. You don't need to eliminate uncertainty to move forward. You just need to refuse to let it paralyze you. Think of a ship lost at sea. The captain doesn't wait for the storm to clear completely before setting a course. He studies the wind, the stars. He moves steadily, carefully, but he moves. Standing your ground doesn't mean you have every answer. It means you trust yourself to keep going anyway. I once heard someone say, "When nothing is certain, anything is possible." At first I thought that sounded a little too poetic for my taste. But over time, I've come to appreciate the truth in it. Because when the road you thought you'd be on suddenly disappears, yes, it's scary. But it also means you're no longer confined to that one road. And that's where some of the most meaningful chapters of our lives begin. Uncertainty, discomfort, disruption, these things force us to think more clearly, to act more deliberately, to grow more deeply than we ever would in calm waters. So let me leave you with this for now. Uncertainty is not a punishment. It's not a signal that you've failed. It's simply part of being alive. The goal isn't to remove all uncertainty. That's impossible. The goal is to meet it with calm, to breathe through it, to choose your next step, even when the whole staircase isn't visible. We've all been there. That moment when the ground beneath us seems to be shifting. We've all had those moments when the future looks a little blurry, a little unknown. But the truth is, uncertainty is a part of life. It's unavoidable. It's not something we can run from. And when it comes, the big question is, how do we respond? Do we freeze? Do we let it paralyze us? Or do we find a way to respond, to stand firm in our purpose and still move forward? I remember reading about a story from the oil crisis, one of the toughest economic times in recent history. You see, businesses everywhere were struggling. Costs were skyrocketing, inflation was through the roof, and for many it felt like the world was falling apart. But in the middle of all that chaos, there was a man named Tom who owned a small manufacturing company. Now, he wasn't rich by any stretch. He had a small team of workers, and his business was pretty stable. Suddenly, everything changed. Raw materials became more expensive. The price of steel and aluminum, key components in his business, shot up. His suppliers were running out of stock, and orders were drying up fast. It wasn't just a slowdown, it was a full stop. Now, Tom had every reason to panic. His business was facing a real threat. In moments like that, you're faced with a choice. You can freeze and hope it'll pass, or you can do something about it. And Tom wasn't the type to freeze. No, he had a different approach. He stood his ground, but standing his ground didn't mean stubbornly sticking to his old ways. It didn't mean refusing to adapt to the new circumstances. Standing his ground meant finding a way to keep things moving forward, even if it wasn't in the direction he'd originally planned. You see, Tom didn't just wait for things to get better. He looked around, observed the market, and asked himself one simple question. What is needed right now? Now, I want you to think about that for a second. What do you do when the path ahead looks unclear? What do you do when things aren't going as planned? Most people, when faced with uncertainty, either freeze or they make drastic, often hasty decisions. They sell out, fire people, and close shop because they think the uncertainty is something that has to be avoided at all costs. But Tom didn't do that. He didn't throw in the towel. Instead, he got creative. He saw the challenge as an opportunity to think outside the box. With prices soaring, he knew he couldn't keep making the same product. The market wasn't buying what he was selling anymore. But he didn't just shut down and quit. No, he pivoted. He took his existing machinery and equipment and started making parts that were in short supply, things other businesses were scrambling to find. Simple mechanical components, spare parts that manufacturers needed to keep their own production lines running, and even parts for repair shops that were still open. It wasn't easy. Tom had to change his production line, negotiate new deals with suppliers, and find new clients who needed what he could provide. But he kept his workers employed, kept his factory running, and kept his business alive. And slowly things turned around. Now, I want you to notice something here. When Tom faced uncertainty, he didn't run away from it. He didn't avoid it. Instead, he found a way to adapt to it. He didn't freeze in place and wait for the storm to pass. He faced it head on, and he did it with intention. Standing your ground is about staying true to your goals, your purpose, your values, and finding a way to keep moving forward even when the road gets tough. We think that if we just knew what to do, if someone would just hand us a map, we'd be fine. Resilience isn't about having all the answers, it's about having values. Because answers change, circumstances shift, plans fall through. But your character, that's your anchor. That's what shows up when everything else is falling apart. I want you to remember this. We can't always control what happens, but we can always control how we respond. That response, the one you choose in the face of uncertainty, is shaped by your values. Your belief in who you are and what kind of life you're building. Even if the road's unclear, let me tell you a little about myself. I did everything under the sun, clerk jobs, delivery boy, odd jobs, just to get by. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon. I didn't have a 5-year plan. I didn't even know what was possible. But I believed in something that didn't require certainty. I believed in showing up. I believed that if I kept learning, kept treating people with respect, kept doing the right thing, I'd find my way. I didn't have answers. I had values. And those values, integrity, hard work, respect, faith, they became my compass. They still are. That's why standing your ground doesn't mean refusing to change. It means knowing what you're standing for. You're not standing still. You're standing strong. And that strength doesn't come from knowing the future. It comes from knowing yourself. Even if you're unsure of the path, you can be sure of your integrity. You can be sure of your persistence. You can be sure of your dignity. Huh? Let me paint you a picture. Think of a single mother working 2 jobs just to keep her family afloat. She doesn't know how she's going to pay the bills next month. She's tired, stressed, and stretched thin. But she shows up. She makes breakfast. She tucks her kids in at night. She keeps going, not because she has every answer, but because she's guided by love, responsibility, and sheer grit. Or picture someone who's rebuilding after losing a spouse or going through a divorce. They feel like a piece of their identity has been ripped away. The future looks unfamiliar. But they wake up, they grieve, they go for a walk, they call a friend. And slowly, one day at a time, they keep showing up to life. Maybe it's a young person, maybe it's you, standing at a crossroads. You've got a million voices telling you what to do, who to be, which path to take. But you're not sure, you're not clear yet. And that's okay. Because while you figure it out, you can hold on to the things that don't change. Your work ethic, your kindness, your belief in something greater. Those values will carry you further than any 5-step plan ever could. It's in those exact moments, the ones that feel foggy, hard, uncertain, that our character gets built. Because character doesn't form in comfort, it forms in crisis. A tree doesn't grow strong roots on sunny days. It's the storms that dig them deeper. You don't build resilience by waiting for perfect conditions. You build it by facing what's in front of you, head on, heart open, and deciding who you're going to be through it. So, when life feels shaky, when the plans fall apart, when the phone rings with bad news, pause, breathe, and instead of asking, "What do I do now?" ask, "Who am I in this moment? What do I stand for? What kind of person do I want to be, no matter what happens next?" Because if you can answer that, you've already won half the battle. Here's what I know for sure. Uncertainty isn't something to escape. It's something to outlast. And when you do, you discover that you're not just surviving it, you're being shaped by it. Because in the end, it's not the certainty that defines you, it's the courage to keep going when nothing is certain at all.